And it was also in 2014 that I started to work out. A little inspiration from my son. I used to be fairly hefty. I used to be 240, 245.
Mm-hmm.
So I started working out in the spring of 2014, switched from Coke to Diet Coke. I wasn't doing anything intensive. I wasn't running. I was lifting weights 3 days a week. But I started losing 35 pounds in less than 6 weeks. Then it was 40. Then it was 45. And I'm like, wow, this working out and switching to Diet Coke really works. Well, then I started to have some symptoms of tingling in my fingers, tingling in my toes, pain in my neck, intestinal issues, and the weight just kept melting off, and there was no increased stress yet in the marriage, so I can't attribute it to anxiety from stress on the home front. But I would ultimately discover that that's when I believe she was putting arsenic in my protein powder. It would take me a couple of years to figure that out, but the symptoms and the weight loss with some blood work got so bad that I had elevated white blood cell counts. I had liver enzymes that were significantly off. I had another enzyme called creatine phosphokinase that is, normally elevated with a heart attack, a stroke, or a brain injury, or crushing muscle injury. Mm-hmm. That was significantly elevated. And they took them a few years to figure out actually what was happening. But I was evaluated for early onset of ALS, Parkinson's, leukemia. And so I'm going through all sorts of health issues, and it was at that same time that her mother got involved in the game.
What was she trying to do with you? I mean, she was trying to kill you?
Yeah, I believe she was trying to kill me. And people say, why is she not in jail? Well, by the time I discovered this, I'd been bounced out of the house, and we had been separated for a year. And so I no longer had access to the protein powder. But she would religiously pull that protein powder out of the cupboard when I was still in the home and accuse me of putting something in there. She'd pull it out and she'd want to read the label to me again. I'm like, it's 100% whey protein. I'm not going through this again. She's like, you're putting something in your protein powder.
She was accusing you of what, putting something in it to lose the weight and gain the muscle, beyond like the protein?
Drugs or whatever, because that's when the accusations of drugs started to begin, because I was getting thin, and that only fueled her infidelity piece, and also with her mother, because it's like, you're working out, you've lost 45 pounds now.
We got a couple of comments here from some of our regular viewers. Like, we got a guy here saying, her SMV was lowering, meaning her sexual marketplace value was lower than yours. Yeah. She was thinking yours was higher and you were going to move on. Like, did she fall apart during the marriage? Did she put on weight? No,
she didn't. Actually, and certainly what I would later discover that, she was not only abusing Adderall and Adderall XR, but also Ritalin LA, which is a long-acting form of another amphetamine. So her weight was never an issue. But she had a lot of, and I think your listener's comment is pretty accurate. She had a lot of health issues. I mean, and those dated back to 2001. So in addition to borderline personality disorder and narcissistic.
Was she ever officially diagnosed by anybody for narcissism or borderline?
No, because anybody that she went to, she was able to fool them. So nobody ever believed it was her. They always believed that it was me, that she was in a controlling and an abusive marriage, and he's got anger issues. And of course, oh, by the way, I was the one that spent 9 days in a psychiatric facility. I was the one that was misdiagnosed with bipolar 2. And that occurred in the fall of 2014 after staying on an island, keeping it all to myself, and enduring 6 months of harassment from her mother and from her, and accusations of infidelity and drug addiction and lack of trust in our marriage. And like I said in my video clip to you, they just hollowed me out. I mean,
No, it's exhausting. I completely understand. Was she a stay-at-home mom? Did she work? Like,
she was. She was a stay-at-home mom. Yeah, of course. As you know how that plays out. Well, maybe you don't. I don't know what you.
Was there a sequence of guys that were kind of lined up over the years, or was it just one guy that she was cheating on with you?
We never figured it out.
You never got to the bottom of it, eh?
No, because she, as we moved forward to our alimony trial, and we had phones imaged and computers imaged, and my daughter's iPad, my daughter's phone imaged, and all my stuff imaged, she restored her phone to factory settings. Okay. So she wiped her phone, and she also wiped all the computers that she had in her possession. So the only thing that she turned over to me was 14 emails. 14,
Yeah.
1-4.
Textbook gaslighting is what is that?
Absolutely. I'm laughing about that now because I also went through a domestic violence trial. After I was out of the house, she filed domestic violence charges against me. And we resided in North Carolina at the time. And North Carolina is a non-pleading state. So you can say whatever you want and you'll get your day in court. Well, she claimed that she was afraid of me and my daughter was afraid of me and I was going to kill her. And so we ended up in a domestic violence court. And my smile was because my domestic violence attorney covered the mic when she was on the stand and leaned over to me and he said, she's gaslighting you. And I said, what does that mean? He said, look it up. And sure enough, I got very well educated about gaslighting. So,
she was accusing you of drugs and cheating, and you got locked up. So did you commit yourself, or did she like somehow influence this process to get you locked up? Like the psychiatric ward thing, I'm confused about that. Can you kind of break that down?
Yeah, absolutely. I was confused about it too.
I bet. What am I doing here?
Yeah, well, how did I end up here? But so again, spring of 2014, she starts in with these accusations. Her mother gets in on the game. We're on a beach trip in June of 2014 with her little family and our 2 kids. And it was on that lovely beach trip that her mother threatened to kill me. So I came up to the kitchen just to get a soda. And her mother and her had gone somewhere, and they're standing at the end of the counter. I'll never forget it. And her mother just looks me dead in the eye from the end of the counter and says, if you put your hands on my daughter, I'll kill you.
What brought that on? Why did you bring that up?
Perhaps you're addicted to porn. Perhaps you're addicted to drugs. There's something going on, something maybe that happened in your childhood. You need to figure it out, and you need to dig deep into yourself. So it was.
See, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree in that family, huh?
Right. So it was whatever she was feeding her mother, whatever she was telling her mother. And again, a woman that I unconditionally loved for 23 years, welcomed her into my home, took her on vacations, but she turned on me like a cobra and offered no explanation. When I asked her, I did ask her, once I got over the shock, I said, what have I ever done to your daughter that would lead you to think I was going to kill her and I was going to hurt her? And she had to think about it. She says, well, she told me that one time when you got angry at her, you shook the dishwasher rack and you broke it. I said, I didn't break it. I did shake it. But of course, this is at the height of when she's just badgering me, every other day with some type of crazy, paranoid, delusional accusation. So that occurred in June. In September of that year of 2014, again, I spent the summer just kind of staying on an island, doing my own thing, feeling empty, feeling like a piece of dirt. And, that was at that point that I had all the weight loss going on. And I had all sorts of medical issues that I couldn't figure out what was happening with me. And Friday night, September 13th, she called the cops on me. September 14th, I went down to Charlotte, North Carolina to see my son because my daughter had already been alienated from me. I wanted him to know what was going on. I wanted him to hear directly from me. And I didn't want to lose him too. So when I got back from there, she had decided at that point that, I think it's time. I think it's time for us to separate. And it was the thought of me losing my family. When I went to see the family practitioner that following Monday, she was kind enough to go with me. So the thought of me losing my family and all the instability and all the things that had happened, that he looked at me and said, well, if you lose your family, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I will do without my family. And he interpreted that simple little statement, less than 2 minutes. He says to me, I think you have bipolar. And if you don't go to such and such a hospital, I'll have you involuntarily committed. So the same guy a few years later would backtrack. I didn't see him anymore, but he would backtrack and call it anxiety.
How long do they keep you there for?
Well, I went to one facility, went to the place that he said I needed to go to, a dedicated psychiatric facility. And I show up with my little piece of paper. Again, I'm a broken man. I don't know how I was walking. Show up at the window with my little piece of paper that says, I think I might hurt myself. And the nice gentleman behind the window says, it's an 8 to 10 hour wait. Grab a seat. So I'm like, I'm not staying here. So being in the pharmaceutical medical industry, I knew the hospitals in the area. I knew a place that had a psychiatric facility. It was an acute care hospital. Went there and handed them my little piece of paper. And sure enough, I stayed there for 3 days. And then I got a police escort to the place I tried to avoid. They sent me there 3 days later for another 6-day stay. And my civil rights were violated because after I got out, I looked at what the North Carolina law was, and they should have reevaluated me within 24 hours as to whether or not, is this involuntary commitment, is this necessary? And I didn't see another psychiatric healthcare worker for 72 hours.
This sounds like it went on for years. How are you able to work? Like, you've got a business to run. Well,
it's interesting. So got out of psychiatric facility after 9 days. A couple of my brothers came to town, which is, I'm great. That's when I finally let people into my world, let them know what was going on. And I stayed in the marriage, whether it was right or wrong. I don't regret it now because of the revelation that I received 6 or 7 months later. But I stayed in the marriage and was manipulated out of the house in May of 2015. While I was still in the home, I actually got promoted into the position I have now. So I was able to dial in work-wise. I was able to stay focused. None of the folks that I work with, my boss, none of them knew what was going on personally. They knew there was something going on with my health because at that point I had lost 70 pounds and I just looked like death. And, when the book came out, a lot of them that have read it said, oh, now this makes sense. I didn't want to say anything to you at this particular meeting, but we all thought you were dying of something. So yeah, ironically, and by the grace of God, I was able to get promoted into this position. So, but I'm in California in December 2015, 4 or 5 months before I left the house, was manipulated out of the house and getting ready for a third interview for this job. And she calls me a half hour beforehand. And once again says, I think we need to separate. And at this point, I just got to the point of just laughing in her face. And I'm like, you realize I have a third and final interview a half hour from now. She says, no, I'm aware of that, but I just wanted to get that off my chest. And I'm like, okay, you wanted to derail me again. So fortunately, somehow I was promoted into this position and haven't missed a beat, from a work perspective.
It's amazing that you actually accomplished that going through a train wreck of a divorce, because I know that when I was going through it, it was really hard for me to get anything done at the office. But that's one of the exhausting things that nobody really talks about.